The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Laugh like the sun always shines, spinning wheel, fun times, and there's always something to remember, always something to consider.
Hi, this is Katreese Barnes and Something to Consider. And tonight, my guest is Laurie St Claire, astrologist. Astrologist?
Either one.
Hi, how are you doing, Laurie?
I'm doing great, Katreese. How are you doing?
I'm hanging in there. Maybe you can help me understand why it's been such a weird year for everybody.
Oh, hasn't it?
Well, let's start off first with astrology. There are many people who kind of mix astrology with astronomy, with even being a psychic.
It is funny because sometimes I'll say I'm an astrologer and they just continue the conversation. So, oh, you're an astronomer. And I said, no, not the same thing. So basically, as an astrologer, I give meaning and interpretation to the movements of the planets. So that's what I do as opposed to an astronomer, as opposed to a psychic. A psychic usually just uses the faculties of clairvoyance or precognition. They don't, astrologer uses the planets and the movements of the planets and looks at your own birth chart when they do an individual sitting or an individual reading.
Now, how far in advance can you shape somebody's life or help them see how the stars and planets are going to affect their life?
Well, pretty much throughout their whole life. When someone's born, when you do an astrology chart for someone, you need their date of birth, their time of birth, and then their place of birth. And you calculate the chart from that. I do it using software. Thank you very much. I'm not patient enough to do it by hand. And basically, I call that, it's your map. People say life doesn't come with a guidebook. I think it does. It comes with a map, and it gives a really good description of kind of the territory that you'll be covering in this lifetime. And then you can also, there's techniques, what we call to progress the chart forward in time. And then there's also looking at where the planets will be in the sky in the future, and that relates, how that relates to your chart. Those are called aspects. It's basically everything in relationship. Everything is, it actually is very scientific because it's all based on mathematics. It's all relational, kind of like music. Sometimes you have harmonic chords that go together. Sometimes things are discordant. So that's kind of how I can relate that to music, if that makes any sense to you.
It does to me, but what if someone out there is saying, how can a planetary alignment affect me? What would you say to that person?
Well, I always say, the moon affects the tide, doesn't it?
Yes.
And basically, and if you want to go further than that, it's our body is mostly made up of water. So the moon, definitely affects us. We have the word lunatic, comes from Luna, the moon. Mm-hmm. And always, we have at the full moon, people go a bit crazy. Farmer's Almanac uses the moon for planting. That's pretty well known right there. You can look at that as use of astrology.
Mm-hmm. And also for women and their cycles. And,
exactly.
So, and some people even use astrology even to determine whether they're going to get a surgery or not.
Oh, definitely. Because each of the planets represent an archetype. It's kind of like psychology is all based on archetypes. Well, astrology is the same thing. Each planet represents an archetype of the psyche. So that's, when you look at those, you can see how things might be affected. And like you said, with surgery, obviously, no day is perfect. That's just the kind of world we live in. But you can, there's a type of astrology that's actually called medical astrology. A lot of people don't know that there are specialties in astrology. There's financial astrology, medical astrology, mundane, which is like world politics. So with medical astrology, you can pick days that will cut down possibilities for, just like, say, we were talking about the moon. It's very well known that you try to not have a surgery date when the moon is right around full, because you will tend to bleed more.
Interesting.
Right. So, just something basic like that can help out a lot.
And I wonder if people combine these kind of techniques or ideas with, I don't know, even with psychiatry.
They actually do. There are a lot of psychologists, more now so than before, that are using astrology. I have a friend who's a therapist, and she very much advocates astrology. Actually, I have a couple friends that are therapists and advocate astrology or practice astrology. And it's a great adjunct. Funny because there's, I don't know if you've heard of Judith Orloff, which you probably have, but
Yep.
She's a psychiatrist. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I just said, yep, I've heard of her.
Yeah. And she, is a psychic, and she uses that in her practice.
Great. And
Yeah,
so if somebody were to use astrology in their psychiatry practice, would they kind of say to a person like, look, the planets are going to be this and this and this and this. You might be feeling more anxiety just because it's just planetary, more so than the fact that you are crazy or you need all this medication.
Yeah, that's funny. You know what? I've actually had clients come to me, and after a reading, they say, "Oh my God, you could have saved me 12 years of therapy."
Wow.
Yeah, really. And it's so often that people do come to me and they say, "Oh, so I'm not crazy." People just need the validation that they're going through something. It has a purpose. It has an end. Did that answer what your question was?
Yeah, so you're saying, okay, if somebody were, say, having anxiety for 12 years, what kind of things would show up in their chart?
Wow, 12 years. It's interesting. With the chart, you can see actually if someone could tend to have, I'll say quote unquote real mental problems or disabilities. And that would definitely show up where it might actually be the person would be prone to certain things like obsessive compulsive disorders or things like that. And that would kind of fall under the medical astrology. But just, a basic, just basic astrology, you can look at things and see where someone might tend towards anxiety. It might just be something that they kind of cope with, for this whole life, and they need to learn certain techniques that can help them. And you can look at the chart and see how someone might benefit. Let's see if I can, like, say the person doesn't have any planets in Earth. There are 4 elements: the earth, the air, the water, and fire. And someone that doesn't have any planets in Earth when they're born, it would really be beneficial for them to do things that bring in the earth element, like get a massage, garden, be out in nature, things like that.
And so those kinds of things early on, and coping techniques, could even thwart major psychological problems, you mean?
Well, I think they could help a lot. It's funny, I do see a lot of people that are going through major transitions, and they can be kind of psychologically, quote unquote, at the end, kind of at wit's end, and to see, where something is coming from, and sometimes it's hard to see ourselves. Other people, you can see something much more clearly for somebody, a friend of yours, at times than they can see, because it's like if you're looking at a painting and you're standing 2 inches from it, you don't really have perspective.
Uh-huh.
You step, 3 feet away, you can see the big picture, and that's really what astrology does, is it kind of looks at the big picture. And with the type of astrology that is my specialty, which is evolutionary astrology, it's about not what do I want to say? Not that things are predestined and fated. It's that everything is potentiality, and you have freedom and free will to make the best choices possible. And so by knowing what your predispositions might be, you can make better choices and use the energies to your advantage instead of kind of being a victim of them.
Okay, when you say evolutionary astrology, like, for example, you're talking about spiritual growth and or just life path?
Kind of both. So with the evolutionary, part of the evolutionary that I practice looks at past life, because there's a lot of indicators in the chart that can indicate past life, and then what you've done. And if you don't subscribe to past life, you don't believe in reincarnation, this could also be attributed to like a genetic predisposition, things that are passed down, through the family line. So there's a lineage and a history of these particular habits or ruts that you can get into, because when you've done something before, it's easy to keep doing it because we're familiar with it, and we like to do the same thing that's comfortable, but then we don't grow. And so with the evolutionary astrology, we look at that point in your chart that shows where most of your growth is going to come from by integrating those energies. And that has to do with what we call the nodes of the moon. It has to do with the moon's orbit.
Okay. Now, past life, is it if somebody were to believe in that, is it your most recent past life, or can you determine past lives?
I like that you said that. So when I look at someone's chart, what I see, I'll tell people, this may be exactly what your past life was, but I give scenarios that would be similar to the themes that came up in your past lives. And it might not necessarily be the exact past life you had, but it could be. I find it interesting because a lot of times when people are born, they have very similar, a similar setup to things that they might have experienced in their past life so that they can work on those themes. And it doesn't mean that every past life had to do with those themes. It's just that in this life, when you've incarnated, you've chosen to work on these particular lessons. Because I believe, we've had, hundreds, if not thousands of past lives.
Yeah, I mean, this might be getting very woo-woo, but there are some people who believe that the reincarnational thing is actually a trap. I mean, I've heard, I almost tend to subscribe to that train of thought nowadays. I mean, the audience is going like, what the fuck are they talking? Oh, can I curse? What the hell? What the heck? I'll bleep that out. But yeah, I've heard people in recent days say that the reincarnation is a trap of some sort to keep people kind of bound to this earth.
Okay, so do you mean in reincarnation in that the idea of it, or actual reincarnation is a trap?
The actual reincarnation is a trap because supposedly, energetically, we should have the choice. But once people believe that they're supposed to come back here, they come back here in a similar holding pattern. But like, I don't know if you guys know this guy named Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian whistleblower. He's had shows about that. I mean, actually, you could probably see a lot of shows on YouTube about it where they say that, because one of the funniest things I heard him say was, he says when he crosses over, he says, "I'm gonna keep on walking. I'm not gonna just believe."
Right. It's funny, I haven't heard of him. I'll have to check him out. I mean, because I'm open, and I think it's important for people to check out different things and to go with, you always have to trust yourself and your inner, you got to go with your gut and never take, what anybody else says, 100% as the gospel truth. It's got to be resonant for you, and it's got to check out for you. It's like when you go to the grocery store, you don't buy everything in the store. You buy what you need. But for me, and the way that I look at that, I believe that we do come back here. I believe we have a choice to come back here, and because we're learning certain things. And sometimes we're slow learners. Sometimes we're here to meet up with other people. And I do, and this will get really woo, I think that, we don't always incarnate on this planet, but that's like a whole nother conversation. So, and I can't say I know a lot about that, but, who knows? There's so much we don't know.
Yeah, if anyone knows me, they know that I've kind of traveled in very esoteric circles. So this conversation is not, strange for me. And, I have started questioning whether some of the setups of this planet in terms of incarnations have not been partially manipulative. Sometimes I wonder. I mean, I tend to believe that more so now because a lot of things just don't make sense anymore.
Well, boy, isn't that true? I have to say, because you were talking about, what's been going on since the beginning of the year, and I do feel like there's the whole thing of, unfortunately, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and how a lot of the stuff that's been going on has just been bringing stuff up into the mass consciousness that you just can't deny. And I think that's been a lot of definitely the upset for people, but a lot of times it's necessary for things to come into people's awareness. So that
But don't you think there's always
get dealt with. Sorry.
But don't you think there's always been some horrific stuff that's happened to people and on the planet that they should be able to reflect and just move past that kind of mindset? Yet it seems this past year or so, people are reverting to similar mindsets that have been just as destructive as different times in history.
Definitely. I do think so. And part of when you look at astrology, that there are repeating patterns, and I think it's a bit like, we'll call it, instead of Groundhog Day, we'll call it Groundhog Planet, and that it, to me, part of being on this planet is you've got the learning curve of masses. We have so many people here, and for big shifts to happen, you have to have a large number of the masses, and we keep getting opportunities, quote unquote. We can call them challenges, we can call them opportunities, and people. To me, that's part of how astrology can help, is to raise awareness and consciousness of what you can do individually, because, as individuals, we're part of the collective and the mass, the masses, and not to overlook that. And I think that's part of what this year has been bringing up in, astrologically, that we have to get out of our comfort zone to make the changes that we need to make and to wake up.
And why this time period over other time periods?
Well, I think we just keep getting these opportunities, and especially now, it's like you said, like we've got things in play that seem very threatening to to our basic existence. I mean, we've been on the threat of, verge of a nuclear war. We've had wars in the past, and this is kind of like a whole new ball game with the weapons that we have right now.
And also, I just read an article that said by 2015, there will be more plastics in the ocean than fish. I mean, that's not that far away.
Oh, no. When did you say
2050.
2050. Yeah, it's not that far away. And that's the thing. We just had a big shift, May 15th. The planet Uranus went into the sign of Taurus, and it spends about 7 years in each sign. And that really kind of from April, there was a lot of tension going on just before a big planet like that shifts into another sign. And hopefully, it's kind of like that thing. We do all have free will, and we can choose to, every day you get up and you get to choose kind of, what am I going to eat? Am I going to make good choices? Am I going to make bad choices? And so when I'm looking at the astrology, I'm looking at the collective consciousness of, okay, now we have to, Uranus is what's known as, it brings in the archetype of the awakener, the rebel, the revolutionary. It's about enlightenment, but it also can be elitism and kind of like an unemotional disconnect. And when it's in the sign of Taurus, Taurus has to do with nature, it has to do with our values, it has to do with beauty and culture. And so this combination is asking us to make big changes in how we have been relating to nature, and to come up with some kind of solutions for the complacency that we've had about the way that we've been living and relating to Mother Earth and also our value system. And unfortunately, sometimes it's got to be, all or nothing for people to make changes.
Wow. Yeah. I want to continue this conversation, but we're running out of time, and I hope you can join me for next week's episode, part 2,
Okay.
because unfortunately this is only a 25-minute show. Yeah. Will you come back next week?
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay. All right, this is Katreese Barnes with Something to Consider, and I've been talking to Laurie St. Claire, and she'll be with me next week. So join me once again, Something to Consider, 9 p.m. on Armed Radio.
Through the night made me feel so right, and there's always